AI is rapidly changing, obviously, and the legal field is changing everything. But particularly as it relates to our field, to the field of law. Well, first, and this is huge, right? Legal research. AI can be used to automate the processes of legal research by scanning through large volumes of case law and other legal documents to identify relevant authorities. The question you always want to be asking yourself is what could go wrong? And the first thing is that AI can create what's called AI hallucination, misinterpreting legal nuance. That's a really, really big issue because AI does struggle. It's not that it can; it does struggle with the complexities of legal language.
Welcome and thank you all for joining us for another Justia webinar. My name is Nina and I'll be the moderator for today. Now to kick things off, I'll go ahead and introduce our speaker, Thomas Schack. Thomas Schack leads a highly specialized appellate group that focuses on business and criminal appeals. Tom's extensive background in state and federal courts, as well as being a former Comptroller of the Commonwealth and a state prosecutor, brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise in legal, financial, and business matters. Tom is sought after for his strategic guidance and deep understanding of business and legal ethics as an adjunct professor of business and ethics at his alma mater, New England Law, Boston. He holds dual JD and MBA degrees. The webinar presentation that you're about to watch will be approximately 1 hour, and afterward, Tom will be taking questions from the audience. So if you have any questions that come up during the presentation, please feel free to submit them through that Q&A button in the control panel at the bottom of your screen. Now, without further ado, here is Tom to discuss how AI impacts small and solo firms, exploring the potential benefits and risks of incorporating AI into practice.
Thanks, Nina. I am really pleased to be here today and to try to walk everybody through this really incredible. I'm going to share my screen briefly. Just give me 1 second. Now we see the presentation. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to this. This is an incredible opportunity. The impact of AI, and we've been doing a lot of analysis on AI and AI systems for almost the past 10 years, and are both academically and professionally, and it's really been a remarkable experience to see how fast this is all evolving, and so I do think that there's a big difference between the type of AI use that small and solo firms will be utilizing on a going forward basis. And so that's why we came up with this presentation, to try to help folks understand, where the risks are, where the positives and the benefits are, and how to kind of discern your way through, from a conversational standpoint. At the end of this, you should be able to have at least some idea of how you can talk about what AI and how AI is going to impact your firm or your practice. It is particularly for small and solo firms. There are, a lot of large firms, a lot of big firms do use much more extensive AI systems, but for us, for our purposes in the small and solo firms, we typically use them differently. So we'll talk about that today. All right. So without further ado, we'll begin. So first and foremost, we have to have an understanding of what specifically is artificial intelligence. And AI, as we refer to it, is the ability of machines to make, to mimic actually human cognitive functions, and to help with learning and problem solving. I know that's pretty vague, and we're going to get a little bit more detail on that, but you should have a basic understanding of what we're talking about. So AI is rapidly changing, obviously, and the legal field is changing everything. But particularly as it relates to our field, to the field of law, it's automating tasks, improving research, and assisting with legal strategy in some circumstances. And again, we're going to talk about the risks of all this down, a little bit later in the presentation. But you always want to have in the back of your mind, kind of one eye open as it relates to what type of systems you're going to use and what type of information they're going to generate that you can use and that you can rely upon, even more importantly than simply using. All right, we're also going to talk about the tasks that law firms are using AI for. Typically now we see document review, contract analysis, due diligence, and legal research. These are these are remarkable advances for us, in particularly as small and solo uh, firms. And the reason is because you're now getting put on a par with the ability to be able to scour tens of thousands of documents, and we'll talk a little bit about both, how you protect yourself in doing that, and also, don't make some of the obvious mistakes, or how to avoid them. So, my first practice tip today is to watch out for systems that will draft documents. The reason I say that is because I mean, there are some really fantastic things out there. Justia is doing a lot of work in this particular area, and they're doing great work in the area. But there are a lot of systems out there that will operate, kind of like the wild wild west. You'll go onto a system, or you'll sign up for a system. It's a few bucks to a free trial, and it will draft all of your documents for you. Well, be very, very careful about the drafting documents issue, because that is where lawyers have already gotten into a lot of trouble. And again, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So we're going to talk about the different types of AI currently, and right now we have two types of systems, basically: rules-based AI and generative AI. The rules-based AI are systems that are closed data, right? What do I mean by that? Well, generative AI, like GPT, which most folks are probably familiar with at this point, that's just open and vast. It draws from all of the internet, all of the resources on the internet, good and bad, right? Correct and incorrect. And so these generative AI systems that are using open data from the internet are very, very risky from that standpoint, because again, they're not drawing from us simply as attorneys. They're drawing, or they're not drawing from the information that we need simply as attorneys, but from just this vast, source of data that really is remarkable. On the other hand, you also have rules-based AI, and what that is basically a closed content set. So, and I use LexisNexis as an example of their new AI product, and I don't do that as a reference. I simply want to be able to convey to most people who may be already using a closed or limited content rules-based AI system. So LexisNexis has that now, and so what happens is, rather than scouring the entire global interweb, instead, what we wind up with is just the facts, right? Just the information that are contained within LexisNexis databases. And it is, again, remarkably powerful, and something to just keep in mind when you're looking at different systems. You want to make sure that if you're going to be, relying upon it, and there's nothing that you can rely upon 100%, of course. Even rules-based AI makes mistakes. It makes a lot of mistakes, at least, so far. Generative AI is like a TNT box with a fuse for lawyers, and so you really have to be careful and make sure that you ask that question to yourself and to the systems that you may be testing out or being sold on. And that's another thing too, is that you got to be very, very careful with the sales pitches of these systems. You got to remember that marketing people in most of these environments are not lawyers. They don't have to live by our rules. They don't have to live by a requirement of the bar. So be very, very careful when, if you're asking questions. And this happened when we were testing one system not too long ago. a very, a very big system. And we were, we wanted to upload, tens of thousands of documents to their system and then scour their system, scour our documents for certain information. It was just a test. And we uploaded 50,000 different decisions from here in Massachusetts. Almost all the decisions that exist in Massachusetts law. And then we ask questions against it. And, for the most part, it was very good, except that and again, as we get to the security side of this, except that security is just always a concern now, particularly if you're uploading your own content. So, y- the real difficult part of AI is that it can struggle with with human conditions, right? Like complex reasoning and empathy. I mean, still human AI systems are not, they're not human, and they're not yet capable of true empathy. And there's also, of course, the nuances that we use as lawyers, and some of these systems are just not quite there yet, but hopefully they will be. All right, the horizon. I'm going to go through this, fairly quickly, but the horizon of AI types. So we've talked about the closed system and the open system. Now we're going to talk about what's on the horizon, because it's evolving so quickly, and we want to make sure that you understand what's coming, at least from an overview standpoint. One second. So, first of all, reinforcement. Let me go back. Reinforcement learning. This approach involves training AI agents through trial and error in a simulated environment. So that's where where your AI agents are training themselves by trial and error. Making mistakes, catching their mistakes. And evolving. It's a very interesting concept, but we're not quite there yet with reinforcement learning. There's also a neuromorphic AI that's inspired by our own brains. And this particular field aims to or seeks to eventually process information, or have AI systems process information the same way our human brain does. Of course, that is an enormously complex and complicated um, effort, and it's going to take some time to accomplish that. But again, all of these things, if we were talking 10 years ago, we'd be saying these are truly on the deep horizon. They're not on the deep horizon anymore. They're soon going to be implemented in under certain circumstances, and so you want to be at least aware of them. All right, explainable AI, or XAI, focuses on developing AI that can explain its reasoning, tell you how it got to a particular conclusion. And without that ability, you really don't have the clear ability to be able to both build trust and ensure fairness. So this area is going to be particularly interesting as it relates to criminal law, at least from my perspective. All right, hybrid AI systems are combining different approaches, and so you might have a system where you're using a closed a rule based source, uh, and then have it selectively pick from the generative AI or the vast data. But again, that's not it's not perfected yet, and with all of these particular uh, forms of AI, you want to be very careful when you hear these terms, because again, they're not perfected yet. And then you have AGI, or artificial general intelligence. This is where we try to get to the human level of intelligence and cognitive abilities. It's still way off, but you have to know that this is on the horizon. It's coming our way, for lawyers and everybody else, attorneys and the rest of the world. And this is probably the area that's most kind of sticky from a theoretical standpoint and from a philosophical standpoint. So again, you want to keep your eye out for these types of advances, which again could be months away or could be decades away. It just depends on how ambitious and how uh, how the development goes in each of the areas. All right. So what can the different types of AI, the two that we talked about today, do for small and solo firms? Well, first, and this is huge, right? Legal research. AI can be used to automate the processes of legal research by scanning through large volumes of case law and other legal documents to identify relevant authorities. Now, I use that example of us uploading, our firm uploading 50,000 cases, or all the judgments that have ever come out in Massachusetts, to a system. Well, we did that as a test, and we did it because we wanted to see exactly what we should be concerned about as it relates to privacy. So you can imagine if instead of the public documents that we uploaded, which we were able to parse into search, very very easily and comprehensively, and the data we got back was very good. But here's the issue: if we were dealing with case materials, if we were uploading, all of the documents in a particular case that we're working on, we have security concerns, right? And you should have security concerns because the large, volumes of documents that are going to be up in the cloud that are accessible by both the AI system and others at the companies where you're dealing with folks, right? So if the vendor is providing a legal research AI tool, and it has the ability to summarize, for instance, your documents, or be able to compare contracts, be able to do a lot of different, it automates, so obviously a lot of different processes. But then you're in a position to be able, excuse me, then you're in a position to be able to to uh, uh, you have to be cautious of your data. So when your data goes up to the system, you can't have, and I mentioned this in a webinar that I did with you all with Justia last year, and that is that you can't have folks in the background engaging in analysis on your information. So I'll give you a parade of horribles example. We've represented a number of political folks over the years, and so if we were to upload all of that information, for a particular client that we've had for decades, and it has all of the, kind of the PII, the personal information. It has obviously attorney-client privilege matters in it. It has, I mean, it's just like opening your file cabinet, your old paper file cabinet, or taking your file folders from your desktop on your Mac or IBM, and then again just putting it up into a cloud where it can be accessed by others. So I don't say that because these companies are going to be nefarious. I say it because it's a risk, and the true risk revolves around when that data gets up there. And this is the example that I try to use. If there's, if there happens to be somebody who's been hired by the vendor, who, maybe they went to Fiverr or one of those companies, and they're getting somebody to, to engage in certain quality control. But that person is sitting in, let's call it a kid. Some kid is sitting in their parents' basement somewhere out in the world, and all of a sudden, if they have access to that information, and let's say you have a high profile or a true political, issue and or client, and that information happens to get released or dispersed, it all falls on you. It's just that simple. So you really have to be asking these questions. And by the way, you can't just be asking it. You have to be testing it too. And the reason is because we have found that a lot of the vendors, particularly the larger vendors, will promise you anything. That they can move mountains and and earth, and you have to be careful and cautious about those particular promises. All right, document review. We'll talk a little bit about that. Contracts, pleadings, and looking for errors and omissions. Obviously, very very important. And then you have also e-discovery, right? AI can be used to collect electronically stored information, and and obviously, if that's relevant to a legal case, it's enormously helpful because you don't have the human factor of having to go through the 4 million pages of documents. Now you have a system that can do it, that can go through the entire set of documents in a matter of, minutes or hours, as opposed to weeks, months, or even years in some cases, as I'm sure some of you have some of us have been involved with. And then there's also predictive analytics. This is where you also have to be kind of, careful. AI can be used to predict the outcomes in some cases, which can help you develop a more clear strategy, particularly if you're a litigator. And but it's also, again, the predictive analytics are not quite there yet, and so be very, very cautious about any of these systems that promise that they can, you upload a modest amount of, 1 page, 2 page description of your case, and they come back and tell you, their AI system, depending upon where it's drawing from, will come back and say, oh, this is the path you should be taking, or this is the strategy you should be taking. Again, very risky, but it's out there. So if you rely too heavily on AI, and today I'm not going to. I mean, we are going to pick on one firm, but the fact is that you have to be aware of what happens if you don't do your job. Your job is to make sure that that you're meeting the rules of professional conduct, which again we're going to review as they relate to AI, particularly for small firms. But there are some really big issues that you can run into. All right, so first of all, you don't want to surrender critical thinking skills to an AI system, and the reason is because it's not that all the information that you're going to be rationalizing or analyzing is going to be, and that the AI system is going to get it wrong. The problem that I see with it personally is that you can become too reliant upon it, and when it does make a mistake, it's like having a stick of dynamite in the middle of your case. So so you really want to be be cautious, and always double checking as it relates to anything that's again, drafting, putting things, sifting through materials, and making briefing arguments, all those things you're very, very careful with. All right, legal and regulatory requirements. There are always going to be issues with relying upon AI and our rules of professional conduct, and the penalties for noncompliance for us as attorneys is pretty significant. Again, as we're going to cover, very soon. So another practice tip: while AI has the potential to improve the efficiency and accuracy of legal services, it's important for attorneys to understand the risks associated with using AI in legal practice. So here are some kind of examples of mistakes that happen within AI output as of today, right? As of for the past year, we've been doing this specific analysis. And I always put in parentheses, you own all of them, because you do, right? This is our firm. This is your firm. This is your name, your reputation. And so if you make a mistake and you're careless, you will undoubtedly suffer. And obviously, we don't want that. So first of all, the misinformation in legal briefing. There are examples, again, that we're going to talk about, of where a lawyer has relied upon generative and generated research for legal brief, and so again, that's utilizing ChatGPT to do legal research. Very, very bad idea, because it makes mistakes, it causes errors, it makes things up, which we'll talk about. The mistaken legal precedent. It might present a case with a similar name or close factual situation to the current one, but with a different legal outcome. So I'll give you an example here in Massachusetts, right? So if you were to search, one of the larger AI closed systems, you would for the most part end up with cases that at least you can go through and make a determination of whether it would be helpful or not helpful to your case. But the problem, with that is that the AI still is not there yet. So, for instance, if you were looking for a standard of review on a particular criminal appeal here in Massachusetts, and you were to search it, you might get great information back again. But after doing just a little bit extra research, you realize that it's talking about that the system is talking about a case that's quite unrelated to yours. And for instance, it might be in our case in Massachusetts, it might be a murder case. So we have something called a 33E standard of review for the Supreme Judicial Court on murder cases. So we don't want, we obviously, if we're working on a district court appeal or something that's something that's minor, comparatively, then you're almost likely to end up with a difficult situation, because 33E, for instance, is not the standard that you would use for an OUI or operating under the influence case, or DWI for some of you, or DUI for some of you. So just keep that in mind, right? Mistaken legal precedent. And then also it can miss crucial evidence. So it's extensive, but it can also, because it's not truly rationalizing, and you got to remember what the system is doing. The system is simply predicting what should come next, right? So if it's writing a brief for you or a draft, it's predicting what should be there. And again, the concept of garbage in, garbage out is really important here. You don't want to be in a situation where you miss something, and your reliance on AI could create an improper vision of the legal landscape. In practice, just imagine the humiliation and the consequences. I mean, look, it's very hard to discuss these things sometimes, but in the context of this presentation, I think it's very, very important. Because this is the wild, wild west still, you are, if you make any of these mistakes, if you don't do the work, and if you don't do your job as an attorney, then you're really, really setting yourself up both for humiliation and consequences. The humiliation of everybody in the legal practice, and I'm sure that just about everybody who's on this webinar today has seen a firm or two who've gotten into a significant amount of trouble. Well, we're going to talk about that. So the question you always want to be asking yourself is, what could go wrong? And the first thing is that AI can create what's called AI hallucinations. It's an actual thing. And here's one example. I'm not going to use the name of the firm, but the fact is last June, 2 lawyers in the law firm filed a claim that included citations to fictitious legal cases generated by AI tool ChatGPT. So this was actually a more senior level partner who gave the assignment to a more junior level lawyer, and the junior level lawyer utilized the ChatGPT and it made up a host of different cases. That brief then went to the senior attorney for review, and it was approved and ultimately filed. So, because of that faith of the mistaken faith in the AI generated information, the judge in that particular case, I think it was an aviation case, ruled that the lawyers and the firm acted in bad faith. Right, 2 really, really, really bad words that you never want to hear as a lawyer. And I mean, a court saying that you've acted in bad faith, but not properly responding to the court's inquiries regarding the fabricated citation. So, so part of this is the come clean aspect of it. If you do make a mistake, the last thing you want to try to do is cover it up. And the reason is because that's where you get into bad faith situation. I mean, you may have created the mistake or the mistaken document or the citations, inadvertently. But once somebody points it out to you, your job is to make sure that that you take responsibility, because otherwise you're going to get crushed. In this case, the judge fined the two lawyers in a law firm $5,000 for incorporating fabricated legal research into an aviation injury claim. So, I mean, look, I, I don't want to have to ever pay a fine as a lawyer. I don't want to ever have to explain to my client why I have to pay a $5,000 fine, or why my firm has been fined. And I'll just say this about that. That is still one of the preeminent examples on the internet of where things can go wrong, right? So, so just keep that in mind. That that you do not want to be that that poster child. You don't want to be the person who's or the firm, particularly. I mean, not that it's any any better or truly worse. As a small or solo operator, it's really a big issue, right? Because it can literally put you out of business like that. And very important to understand that. So first of all, when the system does fabricate case law, they're often searching vast legal databases, but occasionally they actually will create an entirely fictional case that sounds plausible. That's actually what happened in the ChatGPT case. And it wasn't like I mean, obviously they didn't do the work, right? Obviously it's res ipsa loquitur, it speaks for itself. But the fact of the matter is that even in substantial systems, and those systems that are from the larger legal research companies, they still have that possibility of hallucinating, and so you have to be obviously very careful. Here's kind of a techie thing, but biased algorithm output. So what does that mean? Well, AI is trained on if it's trained on a data set that's biased. For instance, if the cases that I uploaded to the system that I mentioned earlier in this presentation, if I had information that was biased in some way, not completely unbiased, because it's all of the decisions of Massachusetts appeals and Supreme Judicial Court, you end up with that bias being drawn down upon by your friend, your AI system, and it can create issues of discrimination. It can create demographic issues. It can also lead to inaccurate conclusions about this and other cases. So obviously be very careful about that. Misinterpreting legal nuance, that's a really big issue, because AI does struggle. It's not that it does struggle with the complexities of legal language. And obviously wording in context makes a big difference for all of us, particularly those of us that are either litigators or trial or trial folks, particularly in the criminal world. You really have to be careful about the wording or context that might be missed by AI. And because look, I'll give you an example. If it happens to read a particular statute here in Massachusetts, and and that statute says that that a person shall do something, right? As opposed to a mistaken interpretation in which somebody may do something, right? So that's the kind of nuanced mistake. I mean, if something maybe can be done as opposed to must be done, it's quite a different conclusion in your research and in whatever you're working on. Okay, so big practice tip. These attorneys in the firm are still the most significant AI-related attorney error. I mentioned that you'll find on the internet, and even a year later, it's still pronounced. And and I have great empathy for those attorneys, but they also put themselves in a very difficult predicament, and they did so by heading out to go out west, relative to searching for new ways of doing things, and it all came crashing down on them. And from my perspective, good luck getting hired by somebody else once they read that your firm has has engaged in something like this. All right, we got to talk about the ethical rules when using AI in everyday practice. So, and that's part of our CLE responsibility here today. So, I'm going to run through the rules that we should be considering when using AI in your practice. The first is ABA Model Rule 1.1. That's competence. Uh, Again, we did a webinar last year that covered a lot of these points, but we really wanted to get into the specifics of AI in this presentation. So you have to understand whatever system you're using, its capabilities and its limitations, if you're going to be using them responsibly. Again, if you ask an AI system, hey, write a brief for me, on this particular case, and here's the facts. Then you're obviously taking an enormous risk, and because you have to be competent in that area. It also means that anything that you utilize from AI, you have to be competent in. You still have to understand it yourself, which is, again, the double check. If you are operating competently and you're checking AI materials that you're using, then you're likely to stay out of trouble with the competence rule. Model Rule 1.6 is the confidentiality of information. I talked to you about that concept of uploading data to certain systems, and I want to just make something perfectly clear relative to that. If you upload the client's information to a storage device that you can then utilize as a closed database, that may be terrific, but you better be certain, not you think, you better be certain that information is not accessible by anybody in the organization that is providing the AI service. It is, you have to keep an eye on data encryption, and you have to have the right vendor. I mean, as lawyers, some of us read every single word of a vendor agreement, and some of us just pass by it, and the vast majority of us honestly pass by it on a daily basis. Because we're not going to take the time to read 10 pages that we've either read before or we've authored and written for clients. So, but in this case, you have to be very, very careful, because you have to understand whether or not there's access to your data, and what could happen if there is access. Because again, that kid working in their parents' basement, if they're politically disinclined to your particular client, you may well find out on the front page of the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal, exactly what somebody in the company can do if they get access to your data, and it's political. All right, duties to former clients. This is also really important, because as you start to utilize previous cases and client materials, you have to be careful about using their information, the earlier client's information, and in which it might create a disadvantage for the former client. It's a little bit technical, right? But you can imagine, and basically the thing to do is, once you start utilizing these systems and you're going to be putting information into a closed data system, you should be very, very candid and open, perhaps added to your retainer agreements or to your representation contracts, that their information, which would be used generically, hopefully not specifically, would be used in the future. I mean, a kind of disclosure like that's probably enough, but you should check with your local or with your state bar if you have any questions about that. All right, continuing, we have Rule 2.1, and this is the advisor. You have to provide independent professional judgment and render candid advice in representing a client. Well, you have to be asking yourself the question: am I the advisor here, or is the AI system? Is it me, or is it this other thing? And so once again, another trap that you can fall into is failing to understand that you have to Always, always, always exercise independent professional judgment. When you're representing a client, period. All right. Model rule 5.1, responsibilities of supervisory lawyers. This kind of goes back to that example we used from the ChatGPT brief that was filed. Uh, Obviously, those of us that have that either are supervisors or we're it's our firm or we're partners, if you're in a supervisory position and you're working, uh, you have to make sure that and we already do this, right, with our subordinate attorneys. You have to make sure that they're operating, within a reasonable assurance that they're going to conform to the rules of professional conduct. So let's just change that slightly, and let's say you don't have your associate anymore, but now you have your AI associate. Same thing. You have to, once we get to a point, and we will be at a point not too distant future, likely, that the AI systems will be able to operate in certain areas as effectively as paralegals and as effectively as research assistants, and in some cases, subordinate attorneys. That's the tidal wave that's coming. And that's the reason that we're all here today, is to try to get out ahead of it and understand that, if you do replace a human or human work with AI, you have to be very, very cautious about that. All right, model rule 5.3, non-lawyer assistance, right? So this is also, kind of a sticky wicket, because we're in a position now where you have an obligation to have an understanding of the AI tools that you're using, right? Because you are getting non-lawyer assistance in that matter. Now the state bars, and I'm sure that the ABAs they're probably all working very diligently right now to review all of these rules. I have no doubt that many, that many will come up with appropriate, at least primary and secondary rules for how you should, how your responsibilities should be handled with AI tools. But again, you own it. You own all of this. All right. So now we're going to move on to selecting and integrating tools into your practice. This is not designed to be extensive. It's just designed to be an example of some of the things that, you can utilize. And I just want to remind everyone that in no way do we endorse any AI system or any research system or anything else. We're not paid by any of them, and so we will maintain our independence. So it's still the wild, wild west. You got to watch out for slick sales promises, term contracts, and automatically escalating costs. I mean, again, as small and solo practitioners, each dollar counts, right? I mean, and we don't want to throw money to the wind, and we can't afford to do what some of the big law firms can do, which is waste resources under certain circumstances. So you got to keep an eye on the promises, right? So you ask a question. We ask this question of a vendor: if we upload our information, will we be able to upload it, and then will we be able to analyze it, scour it? And the answer was, oh, of course. And I said, my response was 50,000 documents, different documents. You sure? And and we're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pages. And yeah, it can do all of that. Well, we put it to the test, and unfortunately, that system, you could only upload, I think 100 files at a time, and the salesperson never said anything to us about it. Now, we don't tell people in advance that we're going to be doing this type of analysis on their system, but we do make sure that we caution folks about the promises that are made, because again, a promise from a non-lawyer who's in a marketing department of the AI system or AI firm is really a big issue. All right, so watch out for those automatically escalating costs too. I mean, it might be free the first week, and then it might be $200 the first year, and then it goes to 200 a month the second year, and then 500 a month the third year, and and again you're contracting for these services. So you always want to be careful by focusing on the closed data systems that we talked about, those systems that are only utilizing the data that has been established to be accurate, right, or at least has a broad reputation for being accurate. You have to train your staff on how to use AI tools effectively, and you have to have, clear policies for data security and client confidentiality. Just like I said, if you're going to be using AI systems, you have to understand who else has access to it, where are the potential pitfalls, and what can you do. All right, so you also have to do a little bit of extra work sometimes on the vendor side with their security measures. Again, if you're uploading client information, there are certain standards that we have to utilize. And you want to be very clear with a vendor. And, one of the ways to handle all these issues is to put them in writing, right? I mean, put them in an email, and then then when you get your response, I mean, it's not that you're going to rely upon it, but at least you'll be able to go back to that organization and say, WTF, how did this happen when you said that you had ABC data security? Again, no system's impenetrable, and you want to be careful of that. All right, common challenges and concerns. Again, uploading confidential client data to an unsecured AI platform could lead to a data breach. I mean, you got to remember that all of this data that we're uploading, for the most part, I mean, some organizations, if you upload client information and you utilize it, they will delete it right away, right after you're done with whatever the AI project is that you're working on. So you really want to be, you want to be very cautious about the possibility of a data breach, because these systems are really designed to be scoured and learned and digested, right? So so all of this can create enormous headaches. Again, you may miss important legal nuances if you rely on AI for your legal research. It's not time to put down the pen. It's not time to put your mouse away. It's and rely upon these systems to do solid legal work for you. Using AI to predict legal outcomes without proper human oversight might lead to inaccurate predictions and poor legal advice. That was what we were talking about sort of earlier in the presentation, and you must ensure that AI is used as a tool and not a replacement for your own legal experience, expertise, and judgment. So how can you stay ahead of the curve, or ahead of or in this case, maybe the tsunami? AI is automating tasks previously done by lawyers and paralegals, leading to potential changes in the legal workforce. Well, again, I'm not trying to suggest that the paralegals are going to be out of business in the next year or two, but I am suggesting respectfully that paralegals are going to be out of business at some point. And the reason is because these systems are just so evolving so quickly, and some of these systems can do the research of 10 paralegals it would take 10 paralegals a week to do. You can do in 5 minutes. It's remarkable. And just keep that in mind. Don't just start like saying, hey, do I really need, this person, this paralegal? Do I really need? I mean, be very cautious about adopting AI as the basis for your research for the reasons that we've already pointed out. Lawyers who adopt and leverage AI will be better positioned to compete with the evolving legal landscape. This is really an important thing, and the reason is because if you're here today and you're attending this webinar, you're already ahead of the curve. I mean, most lawyers, and certainly most experienced lawyers that I talk with or that I consult with, I try to explain to them that that for instance in contract analysis is probably the best AI capability out there right now. Both comparing contracts. I mean, making sure, I mean, checking drafts, so that you don't have to go through with your ruler and cross things out. So, so AI can be very, very helpful in that respect. Um, but you have to, again, you got to be very, very careful, and you don't want to simply adopt that and say, "Hey, well, this costs me $100 a month instead of the salary for a paralegal." Um, we're not there yet. And you are on the head of ahead of the curve. You are on the forefront, but you got to stay there, right? You got to do more of this. You gotta do more analysis. So a reminder about Model Rule 1.1, which emphasizes the need for lawyers to maintain competence in their practice. Again, you have to understand the benefits and risks of the relevant technology that you're using. So I urge you to be very, very cautious in that respect. All right. The other practice tip here and as a professor in entrepreneurship and the law, this is just important for every firm, whether it's a big firm, medium firm, small firm, solo firm. You have to foster a culture of innovation and continuous learning. It can't just be that, oh, well, we found this AI tool and now we're good, right? So now we can move on, or now we can just do the work. Well, maybe so, but you have to be aware of what's coming down the pike. And the reason is because, I mean, in all truth, the AI systems will be able to replace a substantial amount of what we do as attorneys. And we'll talk about what they can't do, but they can, they can make significant changes, for us, and and those changes are, you have to be very, very cautious. But if you constantly have an environment in which you say, hey, look, you you know, you say to me, Tom, you should be checking out, the new systems to make sure that if we're in the wills and estates business, wills, estates, and trusts, where that's an industry that you have to be very, very aware of the AI advancements in. Criminal law, not so much, but certainly you want to be continuously learning. All right, you also have to balance the benefits of AI with human judgment and expertise. To ensure the ethical and effective use of AI technology, attorneys must balance the benefits of AI automation and decision support with the need for human judgment and expertise. Again, this kind of goes back to this. Everybody should just always be looking at Rule 1.1. I mean, you have to know how the system that you're using works, what data is it drawing from, and what could happen if something goes wrong. So legal professionals should use AI tools as aids to enhance your capabilities and efficiency, but not to substitute your own judgment, experience, and your own ethical standards. These are very, very critical issues, and all of us have to be, have to continually be aware of it. All right, we're going to wrap up. But in here, the legal industry is rapidly evolving with AI. But if you're able to learn and understand the capabilities and limitations, you'll be able to leverage this technology and improve efficiency and research, and you can even, as I note here, you can gain a competitive edge. But you must prioritize data security, client confidentiality, and ethical considerations when integrating AI into your practice. You just have to do it. It's a must. Remember, the legal field is built on accuracy and precision. You really have to have a critical eye, and you have to make sure that you review every single word and every single case of anything that you rely upon AI to generate. I mean, you have to you have to shepherdize every case. You have to make sure that you understand. You still have to read the case and understand it, and you have to be able to, in our case, an argument. You have to be able to reference those cases. So finally, it may be exciting, effective, scary, and risky all at once. It is. But one thing that AI will not be able to do anytime soon, at least, is look into the eyes of a jury and make an impassioned argument as an advocate. The reason I usually conclude with this is that you have to understand that 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 there are some human qualities that we as lawyers and humans aren't ready to give up. That's an example of one, right? I've tried hundreds of cases in the state courts of Massachusetts, and both jury and bench, and and the thing that AI will not ever be able to do for you is to make that impassioned argument. It may be able to support your impassioned argument, but there's still the human connection is a very, very important connection in the law. And so long as so long as you're keeping an eye on that too, and that that you understand where the eye to eye or the face to face or computer to computer contact takes place, with clients in particular, you want to make sure that that you continue to bring that humanity to your practice and to the experience as a whole. All right, this is my final practice tip, and I always say the same thing, and and I can't repeat it enough. You have one name and reputation; it can all end in a quick minute. Don't take chances. I mean, if you want to be the next poster child for what not to do in AI as an attorney, then you can just ignore this and and do as you please. But just remember, reputation is everything. Name and reputation is everything, particularly for us as small and solo practices. I mean, it's word of mouth. It's you want people to they want people to continue to refer you. You want people to continue to believe in you, and you want to continue to be able to serve your clients in the best way possible and give them the best service and solutions that you can. All right. That is the conclusion of the programs. I welcome anybody to reach out to me at shack.esq@gmail or go to our website, shack.law. And reach out if you want to talk about anything relative to what you're thinking about doing and setting up an internal AI system for legal support, because again, we're testing all of these things, and under most circumstances, if it's a quick question, no problem. But if we we have the ability to be able to do the deep research on these systems too. So with that, I will hand it back to Nina, and I want to thank everybody for their time and attention today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tom, for that wonderful presentation. Awesome. We can now move on to audience questions. So as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask Tom, please feel free to submit them through that Q&A button in the control panel at the bottom of your screen. It looks like we've already got a couple, so we can dive right in. Our first question is, how do you assess which tools to leverage for automation? They gave the example of Zapier and AI. And are there specific actions that you'd advise limiting entirely?
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's really, I think as it relates to automation, I think we described some of that, right? Like we described the ability, of you to be able to upload or to utilize these vast but closed data sets. So yes, it's going to have an incredible impact on efficiency, but it still is in its nascent stage. It's still in a stage that you have to be very, very cautious about. So yes, that'll happen, and yes, it'll be useful for you. But again, always note of caution.
Thanks, Tom. Our next question is, do you have any thoughts on how AI tools are affecting regulatory work?
Yeah, so that's also, very, very interesting. It's a great question. The having come from the regulatory world as the Comptroller of Massachusetts, this is one of the areas that we try to stay on top of and focus on. It is, if you think about it, like I'll give you an example. Here in Massachusetts, there's a regulatory authority that oversees certain attorneys doing certain work. Right, not the bar, not the BBO, not the Board of Bar Overseers here in Massachusetts, not the ABA, but it's a government agency that oversees a certain number of private attorneys. Those attorneys there's a guidebook that's provided to each of those attorneys when they join this particular group, and it's about 470 pages of what to do and what not to do. So I would say, it's not really a rational thing to go and read a 400-page document. So, in governments, as government officials, we're really good at creating tons and tons of verbiage and nonsense, and we make up rules, and and yes, AI is going to have a great ability to be able to decipher and discern in those areas. And I think it's gonna be a very, very big area. So I think it's a great question.
Awesome. Thank you for that additional insight. Another person asked, how can I possibly mitigate the potential biases in AI and algorithms, as you highlighted today in the webinar, just so I'm ensuring fair and unbiased legal services?
So, bias is something that, you have to reconcile, right? You have to make a determination of, what work are you doing? If you're working on equal opportunity, cases, for instance, if you're working on matters that involve, people's rights or that could involve bias, obviously we see this with the United States Supreme Court often. So you just have to keep in mind that those biases, I mean, if think of it this way, and I don't, again, not to be too futuristic or too frightening, but soon enough, I mean, within the next few years, governments will basically be running through AI systems. All of the systems that your state runs on and that the federal government runs on will be AI supported, and even replaced with AI in certain respects. So but keep this in mind that in AI systems, one of the things that we do all the time, um, when we're relying upon them, is that they're bringing into our conversation. Um, if you, so, let me put it this way: configuration is everything, right? That's configuration is absolutely everything. And I know the folks just understand this because of their own involvement in the AI world. But you have to be concerned about who's flipping the on and off switches, right? So, like, if you know if the IRS, this switch goes on so that you can, calling for an audit in a particular situation, whoever's deciding to say yes audit or no audit, I mean, that's a big decision, and that person could be biased, right? So this is a little bit beyond just the legal stuff, but you really do have to be aware of the fact that configuration, who is going to be setting the rules and the parameters for our governments in the future, for our legal systems in the future, for our legal research, for our cases, for our practices. Those are all important questions, and they're vague. So, we'll we'll get there.
Such a great point. Thanks, Tom. Another person asked, as I start to use AI to possibly streamline my case preparation, do I have an obligation to let my clients know that I'm using it? And how should I tell them if I do?
Um, well, look, I think it's important. I mean, there are obviously positives and negatives about a requirement, right? Like, so if you were required to tell the client, it may or may not be necessary depending upon your practice. But there are certain areas that I do think it's not a bad idea. And, you can work it right into your retainer agreements too, and just say, our firm utilizes the whatever, and we do our best to make sure that everything is above board and accurate. But I think just even a minor disclosure like that would be, from my perspective, would be enough. But it all depends on your risk tolerance.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. And then our last question for today that we have time for, you kind of touched on if you're going to be putting documents into AI, that you should make them general. For maybe solo or small firms that have limited IT resources, how would you recommend doing that? Do you have any kind of tips or tricks about that?
Yeah. So if you want to sanitize, right? If that's what we're really talking about here, you want to sanitize your data or your documents or your material before you put them into this, to a closed AI system that somebody else might have access to. Well, it's a really it's a great question, number one, but it's also a very important aspect of of where we're going in this particular field. So just keep in mind that that there will be systems. There actually are systems, but I don't know that they're really tuned in yet to be able to do the right kind of redaction that we're talking about. So that you can sanitize a document, sanitize information, sanitize a file. You will be able to do that. It will have. It's gonna, and they're working on it right now. So it's not. It's just a matter of time, and not much time. I would say probably within the next 18 months. And obviously that's going to have a dramatic impact. Um, it, there's a great ability there too to be able to share information with other attorneys, right? So if you're uploading sanitized information, and so are all the other attorneys in this particular practice area, I mean, you're going to wind up with a fantastic database of potential benefits for your client. And by the way, none of those other attorneys are going to be, are going to be named and sitting before your client. So I mean, you will always seem like you're ahead of the game, and that you're on top of your game if you do pay attention to these things.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tom, so much for those additional insights. And thank you all for asking your questions and joining us today. We want to thank you for joining us for another Justia webinar. And I also wanted to remind you all, as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, the services that are available to you through our website platform, Justia Elevate. Justia Elevate is our groundbreaking WordPress-based platform that's designed and customized specifically for lawyers and law firms. It offers a wide range of features, but today I want to specifically mention, in line with our presentation, the newest AI integrations that are available with Justia Elevate. So we have our Justia AI Writer and our Justia AI Chat. You can utilize our Justia AI Writer to write high-quality legal content and our Justia AI Chat to connect with potential clients and streamline that process. So if you are interested, please feel free to visit us at elevate.justia.com. Thank you again for your presentation, Tom, and thank you all for joining. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next video.